Why do we see so many athletes go from being sidelined with an injury to running a PR in a handful of months? I discussed this today with our guest, Dr. Jeremy Boyd. 50 to 80% of runners get injured each year, and overuse injuries like Achilles tendinopathy, plantar fasciitis, knee pain, and IT band syndrome are some of the common culprits to sidelining runners. Dr. Jeremy guides us through the return to run protocols of overuse injuries and how he uses the lever system with his patients to come back from these injuries faster and with less pain in the rehab process. If you or a friend are experiencing overuse injuries, we hope today's conversation with Dr. Jeremy leaves you encouraged and with greater confidence that although you may be in the valley right now, your next mountaintop PR may be right around the corner. All right, Dr. Jeremy Boyd, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Brad.
Yeah, and I really appreciate it. I think our listeners are going to get a ton out of this podcast today. We're going to be talking overuse injuries, return to run protocols and programs, and you as a PT really just diving into that world and what you see firsthand. So again, yeah, thanks for being here. And for being on the show. So a little bit about you. Do you mind just jumping into who you are and your background in the space?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on again. And I do love talking about anything running or injuries for that matter. But I am Dr. Jeremy Boyd. I am the owner of Trifecta Therapeutics, sports rehabilitation and performance in the South Jersey, Greater Philadelphia area. We have a couple offices in Glassboro, Cherry Hill, now Swedesboro. I personally run. I just did my first marathon last year in the Philadelphia Marathon. I historically would only do up until the Broad Street, which is a 10-miler run, which I was really cool with, and then basically lost a bet to a friend and ended up having to do a marathon for a trade-off for a golf trip with him. But glad I did it. Signed up for next year, so hopefully I can improve upon what I did this last year. But being that we're a sports rehabilitation practice, really big and hands-on, and returning people not just to prior levels of performance, but using kind of their injuries as a springboard for higher success, higher performance. Typically, a lot of I can't remember the last runner that we've had that didn't end up having PRs after injury, which says a lot about what we have to offer. But we like to look at it from all angles, whether it's like physically loading the tissues, looking at some outside structures besides the injured areas, and also like a psychological. We do a lot of psychological care. And that's where I think a lot of the benefits of having, unloaded type of treadmill systems, just to kind of get people back into it. I always say, like, just any athlete, if you're injured and you're out for a while, and you give them, a soccer player a soccer ball, a lacrosse player a lacrosse stick as they're doing something, it may be unrelated to what they kind of need to come in for, but you give them a little taste of their return to sport, it really kind of sparks them up and kind of encourages them to kind of fish things through. So we like to integrate that with our conversation pieces. So it's about us. I've been at it we've run this practice for over 6 years, and it keeps steadily growing in the sports rehab realm.
You said something there. PRs after injuries is something that you see fairly common. So I do want to get back to that here in a second. But really first, why the name Trifecta Therapeutics?
People always ask that. It has nothing to do with horse betting, which is what I think most people think it has to do with. I have bet the Trifecta before I started the company. And I did win one, but that was, again, completely unrelated. I just thought that was a cool bet. So going back into the history, there's a couple whys behind it. I always had a theme of three in my life, relatively. So I'm the third brother of three boys in my family. So that was a piece of it. I knew I wanted to start my own practice, and original idea was going to be me and two other of my classmates at the time, and we're going to specialize in each individual thing. And decided to kind of just do it on my own. They had different career paths and everything. So decided to specialize in sports, orthopedics, and manual hands-on therapy. So that's 1, 2, 3. And then I was number 3 in all my sports. Yeah, there's a bunch of other ones that I don't want to go like crazy too much talking about it, but it kept going into 3, 3, 3. All my like taglines and slogans essentially were always coming up as threes. So I thought it was pretty nifty kind of combo. I had a focus group. Shout out some names, and focus group was my wife, or she was, I think, my girlfriend at the time, but girlfriend and her family, and they're like Trifecta and Therapeutics. I'll admit that was more of a just it rang pretty well with Trifecta. So and I always thought to go beyond just a classic physical therapy space, to kind of go beyond into like wellness and more psychology, like just a little bit more than just physical therapy. I wanted to go beyond that, so that's why I threw it into the mix, and they were like, "Pick that," and I was like, "Okay." So it works out well. Lattes.
And I did notice, so the triangle is your logo. And I
Yep.
don't know if you've
Yeah.
noticed this. I hope you probably have, but the 3 locations that you have now, like your 3 different PT locations, are like a perfect triangle.
Yeah, yeah. We're actually trying to make a T-shirt out of that. Yes, it did that. A couple of my friends and even our marketing individual all did that individually. Once we like announced, people are like, "Yeah, it's a perfect triangle." So definitely gonna capitalize on that, and I'm glad. I guess any 3 points make a triangle as long as they're not in a straight line, but it's a solid triangle, and
It's a
yeah,
solid,
so.
almost
Yeah.
equilateral. It's pretty impressive
Yeah,
on Google
almost.
Maps when you look at it.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I'd say I try to space out the offices so they're roughly like, 20, 25 minutes away from each other. So they're not like, fighting with each other or any sorts, but it's a pretty tight knit team. So, but yeah, it just worked out that way. I was like, this is perfect. So I was like, I gotta make a t-shirt off of it. So, once they're made, I can definitely send you one.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, no, that's great. Well, so your practice, looks, especially primarily on your website, like a lot around athletes. You see a lot of different types of athletes, which is really cool as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about who you see in your clinic? And I mean, that's a loaded question, right? Broad question,
Yeah.
but who you see in your clinic, and I guess what types of athletes are you primarily working with?
So yeah, the vast array of our athletes is pretty profound, which is something I enjoy. A lot of like clinics are specializing into, just like weightlifting athletes or running athletes. We have a lot of field sports, barbell sports, and we have a lot of running as well. It's a pretty healthy mix of just about anyone who's an athlete, and that's my weird. I always say that it's my weird kind of personal goal is to see like an athlete from like every sort of sport. I know sports getting more like you watch ESPN and now they have like professional tag and professional spike ball, and I still want to treat like one athlete from each one of those just to kind of get a different like feel of each individual sport. But there's a couple of sports out there that they're like my Moby Dick. I'm like I got to get them. Tag's one of them.
Pickleball? Have you
Cricket.
seen any pickleballers
We
yet?
see a lot of pickleballers. No,
Okay.
none professionally. But yeah, definitely some pickleballers. Cricket's always a fun, interesting one. We've had equestrian. We've had a professional ping pong player. So all these sort of things. I'm like, oh, cool. It's like, it's something I'm always interested in. But yeah, it's a pretty healthy mix. It's really based off a lot of our clinicians. So a lot of our clinicians they all played sports and were active themselves. So we've had some runners, we have some weightlifters or CrossFit, we have a powerlifting guy, we have a golf guy, we have a mixed martial arts guy. There's a big field sport guy, we have a basketball guy. So people tend to gravitate towards that. So I was trying to make it the facilities make it easy for all our clinicians to kind of see whatever their passion is. We have a hang board for rock climbers. We have again the lever for for running athletes and everything like that. So whatever you get, like my clinicians want to see, I'm like, all right, you tell me what we need, or we'll make it happen. Because anything that can help the patient, get back to their sport a little bit quicker or a little bit more confidently, we're going to go for it. Me personally, again, I see a lot of runners and a lot, probably more of the field. And interestingly enough, a lot of basketball athletes. I don't know why. I kind of suck at basketball. I enjoy playing it. I'm just not good at it. But you see a couple high level basketball guys, and they start referring everyone to you. But yeah, I'll admit that I'm not very good at basketball.
Well, you have your hands in a lot, so you can't be, elite at everything, right? So
Yeah. So
that's good. That's good. Well, you do have a YouTube video on your website as well. It's showing you play basketball. So you're not a bad basketball player. You can't say that you're a bad basketball player, but
yeah, camera tricks. Yeah, it was a whole game. He highlighted some couple. It was a pretty awesome game for me. I don't know if the camera was on it just enhanced me, but I was making some shots that I shouldn't normally make, but it was a good day for that. But
that's good.
I'm getting better at it. With everything like running and everything. I always trying to steal things from my patients. It's something I try and do. I'm like, all right, if I have a gymnast, I ask them, hey, you have to give me a skill, teach me cartwheeling and stuff. It's not as pretty and that sort of stuff, but everything like that, running as well. So we'll have runners. We're big into ultra marathoners. We see a lot of those individuals, and just your classic long distance runs. So my couple marathoners, when I was running, I'm like, give me some strategies leading up to things. And then we're pretty large in just like your classic like track and field sports. So one of our therapists has a really good relationship with some of the track and field teams locally, and anytime I'm in there, I'm like, yeah, give me. I had someone teach me hurdles. I never done that before. I wasn't bad at it. So yeah, just it's nice to get that variety in.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. Well, let's chat about endurance athletes then for a bit. I know that you guys have fairly specific and like science-backed return to run programs for endurance athletes, and so definitely want to spend most of our time talking about that today. But as far as when you see a triathlete, a runner, ultra runner, what are some of the common injuries that you're seeing as they come in?
So yeah, there's definitely a lot of trends for this type of population. So definitely the big ones are IT band syndrome, which I always debate about whether it's true IT band friction syndrome or some referral pains, and I'll go into that. Is like a lot of the stuff is actually probably coming from a more what we call proximal source, or a little bit higher up the chain, such as the spine. Runner's knee or patellofemoral pain syndromes or chondromalacia of the patella. That's an extraordinarily common one, which you still get some people with jumper's knee, which is more for basketball, volleyball, sports. That's patellar tendinopathies. You get those occasionally with runners, but they're more the patellofemoral pain syndromes, which is pain around the kneecap. And then classic like Achilles tendinopathy and plantar fasciitis is those are probably the most popular, non-traumatic overuse injuries we see in runners. I'm trying to think if I'm missing it. No, yeah, those are the big ones. So that we see pretty often. Every once I'll also get like a chronic hamstring syndrome or proximal hamstring syndrome. That's pretty common, in especially individuals that are triathletes and such. So we see those into the clinic as well.
Do you see many like bone injuries from runners, like as far as stress fractures go?
Stress fractures. That's pretty common, especially medial tibial stress syndrome, or your classic like shin splints that kind of unaddressed lead up into stress fractures, or like compartment syndromes as well. Kind of lead, those are similar things that cause those conditions, whether shin splints or compartment syndrome. Kind of, again, unaddressed will kind of lead into more stress injuries. Every once in a while you'll see like a metatarsal stress fracture injury, and then every once in a while a hip, but it's definitely typically in the shins, tibia, fibula.
Yeah, and so I mean, I wish I had this conversation with you last summer. I had a jumper's knee last summer as an
Oh,
ultra marathoner, right? So kind of like a weird phenomena, I guess. But yeah, I had to deal with some jumper's knee getting ready for a 50-mile ultra. But it was an interesting experience, that's for sure.
yes.
So getting into some of those overuse injuries that you mentioned, ITBS, runner's knee, Achilles. Is the return to run protocol that you have for those patients the same for each overuse injury, or do you have specific protocols for each of those injuries?
I mean, based off the literature for like return to running, it's mostly based off of a lot of the ACL literature, which then kind of they figure out like these type of tests can be applied to just about any lower extremity injury, which a lot of it's just we call like hop testing, that battery of tests. So we like to see people. Some studies say about like to begin to return to running is roughly around 70% of the capacity. So if I was able to jump on one leg, you know 10 feet, which I can't do, but just for simplicity of math here, on my non-injured leg, I should be able to at least hit 70%. The University of Delaware group, which is a big researching group around this area, and they do great into sports science and sports rehabilitation and ACL. They ask to be at 80%. So somewhere along those lines, and every patient's a little bit different. You have to kind of gauge the person in front of you. Some people need it for, you have to kind of, take 70% or maybe 65% if there's a potential like mental benefit to it. Like some people, it's like, oh, I need to get back in and that sort of stuff. You ever want to just, put the patient at risk or anything like that, but you have to kind of see the person in front of you. And sometimes it's like, oh, there's some other things that need to be worked on. If there's swelling in the joint or anything like that, or like let's say patellar tendinopathy or jumper's knee and it's swollen and it's irritated, you may have the strength, but it's probably a little bit too risky. Will hold people off. So again, you want to treat the person in front of you. And then it becomes more after you do like a battery of hop testing, which we have. The current battery is a single leg hop as far as you can, a 6 meter timed hop as quickly as you can, a triple hop for distance for as far as you can, and a crossover hop, which is generalized to a lot of sports. Again, it's like, why would I jump that far as a as a runner or anything like that? But when you break down running, it's essentially one controlled hop into another for thousands of repetitions. So being able to control it, kind of assess how a person does, seeing the confidence in it, because it's not just a pure distance or a numbers thing. It's how a person does it, how they feel about it. I've seen people about to do it and they're sweating profusely just thinking about testing it, and they're able to do to get the requirements, but it's you can tell there's something else going on or they're not quite ready for those sort of things, so we have to hold them back, if need be it. And then once you kind of hit those battery of tests, then you want to get into like maybe a little bit more, one of two things, like a condition specific. So like a patellar tendinopathy, we want to see your quadriceps output, your quad symmetry index. So we want to see how much your quad can output compared to your other one. So if it can put out 100 pounds, we're going to look for 70, 80 pounds output on the one before, the job's not done yet, but to start to return to running. Hamstrings, same thing, just the opposite, working the hamstrings. IT band syndrome, which is more something of the nature of, working your lateral musculature, like your glute medius and minimus. We're going to try and see how they do in a side plank. And especially for something like, endurance-based runners or something like you, in your case, as ultramarathon, is it super important that it's like how much you can kick out and the percentage of that? It's no, probably not, but maybe we set a certain weight, and see how many reps you can kick out, and see from almost an endurance perspective. It's like, all right, we set it to on a knee extension machine, we set it to 25 pounds, and on your non-involved you hit it 50 reps, and then on your involved, you can do it but you only hit like 30 reps. Okay, that's probably not 80%. We still have some work to do, especially because you can do it for a little bit, but as the mileages start to kind of add up, is, are these muscles kind of fatiguing out, and then it's gonna, when they kind of gas out, or is it going to lead to more stress and strain on either the tendons or the ligaments or the joint itself? So
Mhm.
yeah, you want to kind of modify the testing specific to the condition and what the athlete needs. So, again, ultra marathoners, it's high endurance, marathon as well, versus, we have like a sprinter or something like that, where power output and overall strength and speed is important. So we're doing more power based testing versus just pure strength. So you can modify everything. Not everything is testing wise is validated or even researched at all, but you just want to be able to get a gauge on both sides and have a comparison on one, and then compare it to the other.
That's really interesting. Are you taking pain into consideration at all during these tests, or is it just primarily the 70 to 80% output?
No pain. Is there any presence of swelling? The eyeball test, which is just a look. How did they do? Again, athletes of every sort. The entire summarize all the athletes are extraordinarily great at compensating and are very goal driven. So if they get an idea, I try not to play it up too much, but people get when you're writing numbers down or something like that, that this is something that you need to get done. So they'll find ways to get it done. So, but again, did they pass the eye test? Was there a lot of compensations? Did they muscle through? Were they using the right, kind of mechanics? But pain as well. I mean, that's the main thing. That's absolutely the number one indicator of, I guess, a fail in the test. You can get very far, but you're, at 6, 7, 8 levels of out of 10 the pain scale. How long can you go that for? Some athletes are good at muscling through things, but is that eventually going to irritate the joint or the tendons or the pathological structure of sorts? Should we take a step back, build things up, and aim for like a healthier level, or ideally no pain.
Mm.
But yeah, it's definitely something we take into consideration, and especially with the return to running programs, that's generally the presence of pain is usually, it's like a step-by-step graduation. Usually a presence of pain or soreness like keeps you at a level. It's like, okay, we're here, we have a presence of pain when we've ran 1 mile. All right, we're going to stay at this level, work on it for a week, and then try again to increase the next week, and try and see if we can get pain free. Because again, there's only so much you can do where you can muscle through before it's going to lead to something else.
Yeah, I don't know if this is going to be possible, but I'd love to put like an overarching timeline on some of the conversation that we're having here with the
Yeah.
protocols, just for as far as averages go. So, like from diagnosis or even maybe onset of pain to being able to pass that 70, 80% test, what's that typical timeline look like for some of these overuse injuries?
That's a good question. They do vary and everything like that. If you're in really good rehabilitation, and this is non-traumatic based or non-surgical based, you can imagine. I mean, it really depends on those initial pain levels and how much swelling is in there. If it's blown up when you see person day one, you're gonna have to do a little bit more. Not so much damage control, like things are damaged, but you have to work on like calming the structures down or the person down before you can start to like reintroduce load and everything like that. But it can range from anywhere, typical, it again also depends on chronicity. If you had it for a very long period of time, it takes a little bit longer. But let's say, yeah, kind of just a start of your first, repetitive overuse injury, hopefully within a 4 to 8 week window, we can start to kind of get into that, and maybe sometimes even sooner. A lot of things that have been diagnosed as repetitive or overuse injuries, and they're always labeled some sort of inflammatory response. It's not always the case. Sometimes the tissues are, instead of being inflamed and irritated, they're more sensitized. So doing the right things, calming down that sensitivity, promoting it with good health, good blood flow that you get with endurance based things, that can like calm things down, and heck, you can start running. I've had people start running that week. I anticipated, I was like, oh, so it'll take a couple weeks, and boom, by the end of the week we're already running. So yeah, it's tough to it's a bit of a gray answer, but for most things, probably within a month,
Within
at
a
least
month?
start it off.
Yeah, no, that makes
Not
sense.
really.
So as far as the return run, so once the essentially green light has been given to a patient, an athlete, to start progressing back to running again, what does that look like for your protocols?
Run that by me one more time. Sorry,
No,
I
you're
couldn't
good. Yeah. So what does that
parse.
look like from a protocol standpoint when athlete or patient's been given the green light to begin running again, or to on their progression back to running again? What
Yeah,
does like that first almost like week look like, right? Is there like a lot of walk run intervals?
yeah.
Yeah. How do you
I
work with those patients?
Yeah, so it typically starts off with a yeah, kind of a walk run interval. University of Wisconsin, Ohio State, and University of Delaware all have like slightly different return to run protocols or programs. They're all relatively pretty close, where they start off with like point 0.1 run, point 0.1 walk sort of situation, or I'll typically all the protocols are all guidelines and that sort of stuff. So you get a gauge, as long as you're listening to your patient, you have a general idea of, how strong they are, how capable they are, what's their irritability level from the pain side of things. You can start. I typically will go, let's at least run like on a lap situation on a treadmill or whatever it may be. Run the straightaways. Let's walk the the curves around a track. Not that they're actually turning on a treadmill, but nonetheless, that's something to kind of start when we have some, you know, unloaded treadmill systems and everything like that. We can kind of push the envelope because we know there's not as much ground reaction force going into the individual. It's a little decrease on overall just the muscle and the strain on the system altogether, so we can push that. So I always like to be right around my runners and everything like that and kind of gauge how they're doing. Because they'll keep quiet and they'll keep running if you don't keep asking. And if they're feeling pretty good and I kind of know their capacity, it can go from, I've had some people run a mile on their first time back and had no issues or anything like that. But typically it will be like kind of a, you know, less than a quarter mile, just especially if it was something pretty significant. Um, kind of start off with that of like either run stops kind of interval style training just to kind of get them a taste of things, see how their body responds to it, both mentally and physically, because you want to see how it does on like the joints or the tendons, but also like how their nervous system is responding, especially from a mental or cognitive sort of thing. A lot of people are nervous to return to running, especially if it's been a very long journey for them. So it was like, let's give you a taste of it and then build yourself up. And then, yeah, we have these programs, and I'll admit, they'll go a couple weeks into them, just kind of increasing their distance from going like, running a quarter of a mile or and then building up to a mile fairly quickly for most, especially high level endurance runners, who are doing ultra marathons or anything like that, or just half marathons and up. They'll be able to bang that out pretty quick, and so there are guidelines and everything like that, but you don't have to follow them right to a T.
Well, when you're talking about this is where to me it's really important to do your return to run with a PT, because like the eye test is a lot of what I feel like you're describing here, because you have eyes on your patient when they're returning, so you may be picking up cues that they don't realize if they're running on the treadmill or even at like a reduced body weight.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's obviously I'm biased. So whether it's a PT or a good running coach or performance coach or anything of that nature, excellent sports chiro, whatever it may be, it's always good to kind of be around someone. And that way, they're looking at certain things. Like I'll pull up videos. And there's certain things that, especially when it comes to running, it's a lot of things happen quicker than the human eye can process. So I'll go take a video and then I'm like slow mo kind of showing, oh, you have still like a hitch in your step or anything like that. Especially ACLs, you'll start to see, just due to lack of full quad strength after the ACL, they'll have like a little bit of a hitch. So it's little things that you can see, and it's like, okay, one that gives me a lot of information as well to further customize a program. I'm seeing this. It's a lot due to a loss of eccentric quad control strength capacity. Okay, I need a program after we're done with this run, I need to program, some eccentric quad strengthening. Or I'm seeing a decrease in positive ankle dorsiflexion, or essentially like when your foot's on the ground, driving your knee forward. Okay, so I need to go and further evaluate that. Is it because there's a mobility issue in the ankle, or they kind of, due to the prolonged periods, especially people who've been in boots for a while or anything like that, they just kind of almost forgot how to do it. And that way we can address it before it becomes like a problem. So it may say, hey, it's okay. It's great that you feel good here, but we have some sort of things to work on. Here's a couple exercises to hammer home the things that I see, and then hopefully they're improved, and then we can keep progressing versus letting them go on their own. And then these little deficits may kind of start to come out of the woodwork and stuff. So I think that's always a beneficial thing to have someone have eyes on.
What's one of the biggest indicators for you to progress an athlete to like the next phase or the next distance, right? You mentioned quarter mile to 1 mile running, maybe a pretty quick progression, but 1 to 5 miles, like what are some of those cues that indicate that someone's ready to keep progressing?
Yeah, usually, I mean, it seems simple, but it's usually pain. And I always tell people, like, don't lie to me. Don't cheat yourself. You're only gonna, harm yourself if you kind of don't tell me about these sort of things. So long as the tissues aren't getting like swollen or irritated or anything like that, the patient's reporting, being pain free and they're confident. They're usually like, yeah, can I up it? I'm like, yeah, go ahead. And then most of these programs get you up to a couple miles, and then that's about it. Then it's kind of like a feel sort of thing. Like, okay, this is what I want you to do now. And, I try and keep things, there's all these protocols and everything like that. And you get into nitty gritty and read them, and you're like, this is a lot, especially as a patient, because I'll print them out and here you go, and walk them through it. But it's a lot for them to process. So once you hit a certain point, I'm like, 10% rule, just keep increasing. The body likes, and the brain likes what we call a theory of graded exposure. So you take, where you're at, let's say most people, when they do rehab, they're at pretty much rock bottom. They can't do anything. And, whatever your goal is or whatever your previous, capacity was, and, we get you going, and then, just start 10% increasing little bit by little bit. As long as we're continuing to strengthen and building up the tissues, you shouldn't have any issues. And usually when we get past that first like mile and then start this kind of 10% rule, it's usually extremely successful. I can't remember anyone was like, it's doing great, to mile 5, and then mile 17 is when they get bothered or something like that. As long as they didn't go from mile 5 to mile 17, they're usually pretty good. All right, well, we're going to build up from mile 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 and that sort of stuff. But yeah.
And just real quick, so is that 10% increase on like the daily volume as well as weekly volume?
I like to mostly look at things mostly from a weekly standpoint. People like view things in like a day, and then they can rack up a multiple couple days. We always suggest a day in between. They like, people shouldn't, especially in the rehab phase, not go back to back runs, because you want to see how your body processes things. So I like to view things, especially once they get over that first couple mile like hurdle, then I look things at a weekly basis. So they're not just banging out a bunch of, let's say, okay, you're cleared for 6 miles. They're not doing 6 like 4 times in a week. So I'm like, hey, look at your overall mileage in the week. That's why I prefer, again, you want to treat the person in front of you. Sometimes it is just purely the daily amount and everything like that. But I like to look at it, and I'm like, all right, have your almost like your test run day of like increasing it, and then a lesser run. Let's say we're at 7 or something like that. You did your test run, you did 7, things feel good. Your next run 2 days later, go to like a 3 or 5 or something of that nature. Do that a couple times, and then the next week we're going up to 8. And same kind of philosophy. So they're having their test run, almost establishing rehab PRs, which is good for them. And then they're not overwhelming it by trying to do a rehab PR multiple times per week. So
yeah, no, That's really good. So I know you've had, a lever system in your clinic here for a few years now.
Mhm.
How has, bringing an unloading system into your clinic, has it changed the way at all you view these return to run programs, or have the programs primarily stayed the same?
No, it definitely helps, especially early, getting it almost into an earlier start to these programs. So there's certain situations where it's like, especially if it's a loading or a ground reaction force issue, where it's just like absorbing all that force. Especially if people are like prolonged periods where like ACLs and just they're shut down for a while, whether from a repetitive use injury. So there's times where I'm like, okay, maybe they're not at like that 70% marker or anything like that, but we did all of the things, the tissues are healing. We can start it a lot bit earlier, which again, I think from a psychological perspective, I think that's really big for any runner, and any like field sport for that instance, but definitely for any runner, just to get started a little bit earlier, and then you know it's great because that the lever system or unload treadmill systems, they're graded as well, so I can pull off that 40-50 pounds, and then I take the next run, I can take off 10 pounds, and then that buys me a couple extra weeks as the tissues are healing. So it just allows for an earlier start. Not every runner needs it and everything like that, but sometimes you go and like again they clear out real quick. All right, let's just get right into running. But for other individuals, I think it's a really great resource, and also great for like almost recovery runs here and there. It's like, oh, you're doing a lot of high mileage, you want to run. There's some people like, Jeremy, that's all I want to do is run. Don't ever question me or try and give me anything else. All the running presentations I've ever done, I've gotten daggers shot at me for like suggesting some other things. So it's like, all right, I get you. I used to try and negotiate and try and fight these individuals. Now I'm like, all right, I understand. That's a jam. But can we? All right, here's your run. Let's do like, let's say a lighter loaded or decreased loaded run with something like the lever system and everything like that. So I think it's really beneficial for that, but definitely again, earlier start into running, and then again, you can kind of mix and match once you're officially kind of on the recovery side.
Yeah, and I guess what you said earlier really makes sense, right? So if it does a lot of it come down to pain management, you
Hmm.
probably feel a lot less pain at taking 30% of your body weight off while you begin that rehab process rather than trying to start at
Hmm.
full body weight.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it makes sense. Again, a lot of it's just the force absorption, and again prolonged issues, and you're not putting as much weight through it, whatever it may be. Your just capacity to absorb that force is decreased. So if like we see something like, oh, your quad's at 70%, yeah, we take off 30%. There you go, it kind of makes up the difference almost. So it's really beneficial for those sort of things.
Have you seen any other like use cases? Again, this was great talking through like the overuse injuries, especially for endurance athletes. Have you seen any other like use cases for a lever system in a PT clinic?
Yeah, so for us, we're really big on. We see a ton of ACL injuries or surgeries or post-op, all the knee ones, Achilles tendon rehabs, pretty much everything lower extremity, hip labrums. I think it's really great for that. Some of the protocols for them is actually unloaded running. They'll we'll write it in and everything like that. But again, I think a lot of times, especially when little things like I mentioned, like lack of full eccentric quad strength. We can again get them started with the running because there's a ton of benefits of running. Running is extraordinarily healthy for you and has a ton of benefits, from a circulatory issue, getting all that blood, which is all our nutrients and all our healing, from a chronic pain. Cardiovascular activities is phenomenal with chronic pain, and then especially for neural pain as well. So to implement that, we can throw these sort of things in, especially if they're just not quite ready for a full load, or again a confidence sort of thing. It's like a lot of people, especially ACLs, by the time you get them to running, could be anywhere from 3 months, which you'd be surprised what happens in 3 months. To some people, it's like 6+ months. So they almost forget how to do it, and they almost get concerned. It's like something like, oh, there's a lot of things, especially with a lot of these injuries and surgeries, that people are like, oh my god, I'm gonna injure myself and that sort of stuff. So adding one of these systems is, I think, is super beneficial. Again, we can then grade it, take it away, and usually you get those first couple runs in with a lever, and after a couple, they're like, yeah, I'm ready to rock and roll. So I think it's especially beneficial from a psychological standpoint.
Yeah. Again, yeah, confidence is huge, right? That's
Uh-huh.
almost the biggest player when you're coming back from an injury.
Mm.
And you mentioned something when we kicked off this call. I think this is a good place for us to even end on. But PRs after injuries, you see are fairly common. Why do you think that is?
It's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I always say any injury, whether it's repetitive use or a traumatic injury, it can be a springboard. Instead of viewing it as like, oh, this sucks, I'm not going to be able to run, I'm going to take months off, I'm not going to be able to hit where I used to hit. It is an opportunity to be like a springboard to a better you in the sense. So how often, especially as athletes or anything like that, that we actually get to like work on things, especially runners, but really any sport. You're a soccer player, it's like, all I just want to do is play soccer, soccer, soccer. And then you have an injury, it's like, oh, well, I can maybe work on some things. I can't run yet or something of that nature. I can't go full blast playing soccer, but I can work on footwork. I can work on conditioning. I can work on all these other things. And especially when we have a runner and everything like that, is we'll do some things like, oh, well, you had this repetitive use injury because maybe you didn't have quite the capacity of your quadriceps or your muscles, or your lack of mobility and that sort of things. And working on that will make you perform at a higher level. And also on top of that, any psychological care we get, because again, especially from a running perspective, it's a lot you time in there. So it's just you and the pavement or wherever, if you do trail runs or anything like that. So we can work on that. We have some strategies for that. We have some awesome mental performance coaches that we work with, to work on some of these strategies. So it is an opportunity to kind of work on things that you normally don't save time for. Again, you just go, and again, most runners, it's like, you wake up, you may do a stretch or two, but then you just go, right? I do running because it's efficient. You don't have to think about anything. You just go, which is it's a beauty of it, but also can hold you back in a sense. So once you have an injury, we can work on all these things, work on some strength and capacity that you didn't know. I'll throw this out there. Strength training for runners is excellent if you really want to get into PRs. All the research supports that. That doing some mixing up your workouts, adding some strength training will really help kind of push you, and then just make you overall more resilient. But so sometimes they're forced when you are injured, like, all right, you didn't want to do this before, well, you're in rehab now, so we got to do it. But it's all these sort of things combined for sure.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, you gave us a lot of great stuff there. So I really do appreciate it. I also would love to, at some point with you, double click on what you mentioned around the benefits of running. You mentioned a lot of different things, the neuro aspect of it, find super interesting. So would love
Mhm.
to, don't have time for it today, but would love to dive into that with you at some point here in the future.
Okay.
But, yeah, what's the best way for people to follow you, to follow Trifecta? How can we keep up with what you're doing?
Yeah. I guess the best way, Instagram is probably our biggest, I guess, our most popular of our social media handles. But I'm pretty sure it's relatively the same handle for Facebook and all the other sources. But at Trifecta Therapeutics, the S at the end is important, for all our handles, whether it's Facebook or Instagram. I think the on TikTok, where we put up some more videos, and everything like that, is the Fecta. That's our kind of a nickname here. Personally, I'm the decent doctor. I got to work on my putting some more content out there. That's my 2024 goal. But that's those are personally my handles. So you can also find us on our website, www.trifectatherapeutics.com. Sorry about all the T's and S's, but hindsight's 2020.
Yeah. And you guys are Southern New Jersey, right? So if people are
Southern New Jersey.
local, they can check you out in person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, we'll link those for sure. And again, really appreciate you coming on to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and keep on running, everyone.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're interested in learning more about incorporating a lever system into your training, follow us on Instagram @levermovement, or even follow me on Strava to learn how I incorporate lever into my training for ultras. Until next time, keep running.